and Amir Avivi is an IDF reserve officer with the rank of Brigadier General. That is no small thing. He served as Deputy Controller for the Defense Systems, for the Defense Establishment, Commander of the School of Military Engineering, commander of a few different brigades. And here's very interesting. He was the head of office, the kind of controller of the office of the chief of staff of the Israeli army. So he was close to see all the decision making, and this was under chief of staff. That means the head of the army, Moshe Ya'alon. He's also the founder of the HaBithonistim. The HaBithonistim is a security-minded group, which is against it's made up of generals and reservists of high rank from all over the army, but they are there to stand against the two-state solution and other mistakes of weakness that other army groups have been promoting. The HaBithonistim is exactly the opposite. It's about Jewish strength, and I'm very proud to have General Amir Avivi with us. Amir, how are you? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I finished a long day on the Israeli TV, and now driving on my way home to Caesarea.
Well, that's great, and you should have a great drive, and I hope you can still concentrate with us while you're driving, and I really appreciate your time. But while you're driving, watch out for some of the cars that may have a jihadist driver who is part of these gangs, an Israeli Arab who's part of these gangs, and also watch out for some of the rockets that may be coming on your head as they might be flying out of Gaza into the center of the country. So, let's get right to it. Like, Israel is facing an onslaught in various fields, including the very field that we're dealing with right now, which is the narrative war. But it's obvious that Hamas has been preparing for this for a long time, and it's also obvious that many Israeli Arabs, not all certainly, but many Israeli Arabs have completely different feelings about the state of Israel than some other people thought. So how do you see the situation right now? Is Israel responding properly?
Well, I think in Gaza, the army is doing a great job. Listen, even in war, at the end of the day, there are civilians on both sides, also on the Palestinian side, that need the minimum in order to be able to go through the day, And we need to be tough on terrorists, but when we're talking about humanitarian aid, we need to do the right thing and also aid the people when needed.
So for example, somebody named Tricky Nell says Gaza needs gas for the generators for their hospitals. But then Patrice says, why do you want to feed your enemies? I don't understand. So there's definitely different sides to that. To me, it's really a question of, are we having a total war, or are we only having a war with individuals, or really is there a society in Gaza that supports it, or are they really victims of the Hamas themselves? I can understand that, and I believe that as well, that there are many victims of Hamas themselves. But at the same time, isn't this gas going to be used for the vehicles that are fighting against us? Like, could this gasoline bring one injury to one Jewish child? Is that worth it? Or are we, there's the sense sometimes that we're fighting with one hand tied behind our back.
I think we have to take a bit things in proportions. We're talking about a society of 2 million people who got 5 trucks. So I wouldn't say this is a dramatic assistance, and I don't think it's affecting anything that the IDF is doing at the moment. We are attacking fiercely all positions of Hamas and Jihad. We want to really hit hard all the leaders of the other side, whether it's in the operation or whether it's afterwards. And we need to restore, not only in Gaza, but overall in the Middle East, the understanding that Israel is strong. The Iranians are watching, the Iranians are consulting with the Lebanese, with Hezbollah. And if we don't want also a war in the north, we need to restore the understanding that we're strong and we can hit very hard. And this is what we are doing at the moment in Gaza.
Now, General Avivi, one of the reasons that you founded the HaBithonistim, which is maybe translated as the securitists, people interested in security, is because there's been a philosophy here in Israel that we can cut away parts of our land that have a lot of Arabs living there, and we can go into solutions of the problem of jihadism by cutting out Gaza and giving away Gaza to somebody else to control. Later on, that became Hamas. And there's such an idea about the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, Yudan Shimon, there's such an idea to give it away. One of the things that I've seen you in the past few days on the news talking about is the mistake of giving away our land to somebody else to control, allowing jihadism to take hold, and also connecting the Gaza Strip, which became this a terrorist Palestine state, to the Sinai, allowing that connection to happen, and then the flow of weapons to come in from Syria, from Sudan, a flow of rockets, a flow of weapons right under our noses. And you've been speaking out against that, basically against the idea of giving away land. And here we are. 2005 was the disengagement. Now we're 16 years later, and we're fighting yet another awful, bloody conflict with Gaza. So, like, let's talk about the meta narrative, the meta issues. Like, how is Israel supposed to treat places like Gaza? Was it the right idea to give it away? Was it smart for our security?
Well, no, it wasn't, because at the end of the day, what we saw is what we did. Basically, we brought a terror organization to Gaza. At the first stage in Oslo, we moved out of the major cities of Gaza and handed them to the Fatah, which are a terrorist organization. Now, the moment the last military vehicle left Gaza, they started building factories for mortars and for projectiles, rockets, and so on. They started developing them. It took them 6 years, and this is at the peak of the peace agreement. This is not Hamas. This is at the time that it was really at the peak of all this peace process. There was no peace. They were started building rockets, and after 6 years, they started shooting thousands and thousands of rockets on Sderot, on the towns around Gaza, and of course on all the Jewish towns in Gaza, in Gush Katif, in Netzarim, and in the northern part of Gaza. So basically at this stage, we should have conquered everything back, throw the terrorists, and start again. Because the whole idea of Oslo was, let's experiment in Gaza, let's do Gaza and Jericho first, and if that works, we might think about the next stage. But it didn't work from the beginning. From the beginning, they started developing rockets, which is amazing. Now, at this stage, when life became really bad for the Jews inside Gush Katif and the surroundings, and many people got killed and so on, Sharon, the prime minister, one day decided with himself, he didn't consult with anybody, that he wants to disengage from Gaza. Meaning, he wants to kick 6,000 Jews from their homes and connect Gaza to Egypt. At the time, I was at the camp of the chief of staff, and we heard about this plan on the TV. I mean, he didn't consult with the chief of staff. He didn't consult with the head of the Shin Bet. He simply decided. And a week later, he held a cabinet meeting. I was in this cabinet meeting. And there he said to the chief of staff and to the head of Shabak, I decided to disengage. Please give me your assessment. And the chief of staff and the intelligence officers told him that if he disengages from Gaza and connects it to Egypt, in 1 year, Gaza will become Hamastan, Al-Qaedastan, and Hezbollahstan, meaning land of Hamas, land of Hezbollah, and land of Al-Qaeda. He then asked the head of Shabak, Dichter, what do you think? He said exactly the same as the chief of staff, Bogi Yelon. You are going to create a situation where endless amounts of weapons, of know-how, of terrorists is going to flow from Egypt, from Iran, Sudan, Egypt, Libya, into Gaza. And although this was said, Sharon decided to go forward with this plan. He basically fired the chief of staff. He appointed somebody else, Danny Khalutz. Probably told him, listen, if you want to be chief of staff, do exactly what I say. And the very same army that several months before said going to be a living hell, adopted the narrative of Sharon that said this is going to be Singapore. And this story is amazing. To me, it gave an understanding that basically you need an organization that is not under government salary of high-ranking officers that owe nobody anything, only the Jewish people and the state of Israel, and that can fight publicly to bring the understanding what are the national security interests and the red lines of the state of Israel in the long term.
Mm-hmm. And you're certainly, and I'm happy to say that I could see that your organization is having a voice right now in this time where we're really asking the questions of what is the security interests of the state of Israel. But I must say to you, General Avivi, that first thing, I didn't know that I didn't use the proper word before, aide de camp. You were the aide de camp to General Chief of Staff Moshe Ya'alon, which means that you really got to see what was going on in those times. But there's one thing that's bothering me is that the Gaza conflict is relatively easy to understand. Hamas are terrorists. They have a ISIS-like ideology. They've stockpiled weapons for the last 6 years. Now they're firing at us. They also use human shields. And I've heard a lot of the Hasbara folks, explain all that. But this other conflict, the reason today's conflict is different than the last few rounds is that we have this added issue of the Israeli Arabs, the mixed cities like Yafo, Akko, certainly Lod, and also Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. You're really seeing something that we haven't seen before. And this is a kind of sense that we've allowed not only rockets to be built underneath our nose in Gaza, but also the ideology of anti-Israelism to fester in our own country. And there's a sense that Israel a lot of times is not tough on these phenomenons and actually tougher on phenomenons of Jewish strength. So now it's come to these two fronts at the same time. One is definitely a military front, but the other one is not exactly military. It's a quasi-military police front. It's also a sociological front. So tell me how you see this conflict. Is it different than the previous ones that you've thought about and dealt with and fought?
Well, I think there is an element in the Israeli Arab society that is Islamistic, that is anti-Israeli, and that want to undermine the very existence of Israel. And what happens now, that there was a feeling among this society, and I think this feeling is due to the weakness of our political system in the last year or two, that we are weak at the moment, we are not united, we are fighting among each other, at least at the political level, and they can seize the moment to try and bring about some kind of inner intifada against the Jewish populations. The pogroms we have seen, the riots we have seen, haven't been seen in Israel since 1948. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen such things since the War of Independence. That's the scale of the event, and it has nothing to do with the economical situation or the level of civil rights or things like that. It's an Islamistic nationalistic issue, and this is what we are witnessing. And 6 months ago, my organization said to the government that we are feeling that there is not enough border patrol forces and not enough police compared to the size of the army, and there needs to be a different balance between how much Israel invests in issues of homeland security compared to the preparations we are doing for wars outside of the borders of Israel. And this is exactly what happened once this started on a very, very big scale. First of all, it surprised the police and the border patrol. Secondly, they didn't have enough forces. So basically, civilians found themselves alone without any police assistance. In the past, there was a clear capability in the towns to defend themselves. When we established the State of Israel, it was after the pogroms in 1936, and we were well aware of the fact that we might have an uprisal of the Arab society, and that the Jewish towns need to be able to protect themselves before any other forces arrive. This capability hasn't been dealt with for many years. So basically, Jewish citizens had difficulty to defend themselves. The police were not always there. There was a possibility to deploy the military, but the Prime Minister didn't want to do so. I'm not sure this was the right decision. I think in some cities they should have brought the army as well. But at the end of the day, what we are seeing in the last 2-3 days, we are seeing that the effective work of the Shabak and the police is getting better and better. They are arresting hundreds and hundreds of rioters and people who are inciting. The streets at the moment are a bit calmer. But the big question is really, does the government, does the police understand what this is all about? It's not about some criminals. It's about parts of the Arab society who really want to destroy the state of Israel. And they should be treated in a very, very harsh way. They should be prosecuted, they should be sent to jail. And we need to create a meaningful deterrence towards people who want to undermine the Jewish state.
General Avivi, you talk about deterrence for people who want to undermine the Jewish state. In Eastern Jerusalem, where I used to live, the majority of Arab students learn the Palestinian Authority textbooks in the state of Israel. And these Palestinian Authority textbooks are full of anti-Israel hate. So to me, it's like, if you allow these things to happen underneath your nose, if you allow rockets to be built up underneath your nose, then guess what? They're going to fire at you. If you're going to allow Arab children to learn Islamism, jihadism, then don't be surprised if they rebel against you. You have to assert authority, and you have to demand loyalty. And if the state of Israel is not going to be willing to demand loyalty, it shouldn't be surprised when there is no loyalty given. That's the way of the Middle East. And I feel like, let me put it in a question form, which I really want to know your opinion. Do you think that this event, whatever this thing is called, is it the TikTok Intifada, whatever it's called? It doesn't even have a name yet. Do you think that at the end of this round, this conflict, if indeed there will be a near end, do you think that there's going to be what we call in Hebrew, a cheshbon nefesh, a rethinking of our position in Israel vis-a-vis the Arab society within us, and a demand to have compliance and loyalty? Or do you think that we're going to kind of want to go the easy way out, try to kind of forget this thing and get back to normal as soon as possible?
Well, I think that what we should do is definitely understand that this issue needs to be dealt in a very, very large scale way and really analyze. This is strategically the most dangerous thing that Israel has ever dealt with. I'm afraid when I heard today the chief of police, I must say that I was really discouraged to hear the way he was looking at things. And I'm not sure they have the understanding of really what it's all about. So I think that there are
What did he say
many
that
elements that just want to go back to everyday life without understanding that, as you said, for example, we need to change the books, we need to change the education, we need to pinpoint all the rioters and the people who are inciting and arrest them. Of course, we want coexistence. Of course, we want to live together, but we cannot simply ignore the fact that these guys are really endangering the state of Israel.
It's definitely, and there is amongst us Israelis, we do have a yearning a lot of times to get back to normal. We have this ethos that we're the can-do state, and that really, our positive attitude, our creativity, our will to build lives, build families, build technologies, build a decent country in this tough region. It's a very positive attitude, and it kind of pushes us forward a lot of times. But in this case, it's not going to be so easy to forget because it turns out that a lot of people, including, for example, police officers and soldiers of the Muslim persuasion, have given up their badges and their arms, have turned to the other side, and they've said so publicly. It's not a simple situation. It really isn't a simple situation. And in order to have a society that has coexistence, you have to have trust. That trust is very much broken. But the question is, is Israeli society really going to change, or is it going to try to kind of bury its head and say, forget it, let's just kick the can down the road, both in military problems and in societal problems? Or do you think that there's going to be this struggle to wake up and change? What do you think?
Well, it's hard to say what will happen. I can tell you that 2 years ago, I was asked to write a policy paper. What will happen if Israel retreats from Judea and Samaria? And my answer was straightforward. I said, if this happens, the moment it happens, we'll have an intifada in the Galil, in the Negev, and the Arabs will start trying to liberate the next phase, which is Galil, Negev, and maybe even the mixed cities as we see now. So we will not be able to escape from dealing with this very grave issue. And my organization, HaBithonistim, Israel's Defense and Security Forum, we are going to do everything that is needed to make sure that the government, the police, border patrol take seriously this situation and move towards the right measures in order to secure the Jewish people in Israel. Also, by the way, secure the Israeli Arabs who want to live in coexistence, because
Sure.
in the Israeli society, there is a huge level of crime and violence. They are killing each other on an everyday basis. So we really need to bring safety to the Jewish people, but also inside the Arabic cities, where people are attacked on an everyday basis by their own people.
You mentioned the police, the border police and the army, and that's your field. But there's another war which is fought not in uniform and not with guns, but it's in the courts. And one of the big questions is can Israel kind of rein in the rule of the legal advisors and the Supreme Court, which tends to be globalist, internationalist, progressive, and really not seeing the value of a Jewish state, but rather a state of all its citizens, and is oftentimes soft on the crime of jihadism and hard on the crime of being proudly Jewish. And that's another, and I don't know if you can comment on that, if you want to comment on that, but that is,
No,
I think
it's not about my area of specialty at all.
that's right. That's right. And I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. Let's just ask one more question of you, General Avivi, and that is the Biden administration. Do you think that the fact that a new American administration came in and basically released a lot of monies to the Palestinian Authority and also made it clear that they're interested in negotiating with Iran, do you think that had something to do with this uprising and this battle that we're battling right now?
Yes, definitely, on a certain extent. I mean, look, when Trump was in office, he was very tough on the Palestinians and demanded them to dismantle the terror organization, to stop paying terrorists, to stop incitement in schools, and they went on the defense. And in this situation, he was able to pass decisions which are amazing. I mean, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He said that Jerusalem will be forever united as the capital of Israel. He recognized the Golan Heights. He said that the Jews have rights in Judea and Samaria, and basically nothing happened because they were afraid of him. Now came Biden administration. It's much more sympathetic with the Palestinians, and they feel empowered. And this is one of the reasons. It's not the major reason, but definitely I can hardly imagine something like that, like we're experiencing now, happening under Trump's administration, the way they dealt with the issue.
General Amir Avivi, thank you so much. You've had a very busy day today on Channel 13 and Channel 20, and I saw you, I think, yesterday, the day before on Channel 12, and you've been doing a great job giving a position. I have to say that I want to give a little bit of credit to Israeli television that they had a guy like you on, and I think it's a testament to both your high position in the army and also the power with which your organization has made an impact on Israel. And that's just great that they have a person like you speaking there, because we tend to think of the media as extremely liberal and progressive, left so-called in Israel. So I was happy to hear your opinion amongst the other opinions. And
so I want to tell you something about that, Ishai.
Go ahead.
When shooting starts and people are being shot, at that moment, all the media wants to hear the real generals and the real professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what's happening. All of our generals at the moment, every day, are in all the major TV stations. We are not even able to arrive to all the invitations that we have. And they understand that people need to hear this voice. They want to hear generals that know what they're talking about, who have been in the army not long ago, who are real fighters. And this every single Israeli needs in these days.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I guess there's no atheists in a foxhole, and there are not too many lefties when Israel is under true attack. And yet they still exist, and yet they find ways to make excuses and blame Israel and blame the victim. And there's not a few voices outside of Israel today. There's another battle raging on the international scene for public opinion. Somehow I get the feeling that this time Israel isn't listening as much to what the world is saying, which is, I think, a very good thing. And I think you're right. I think people understand that the conflict, this battle is for our very lives, and it's existential, and it's on many levels. And so people like you are so important to us. So General Amir Avivi, I want to thank you once again. You are an IDF reserve officer with the rank of Brigadier General. You served in many important positions, finally as the aide-de-camp to the Chief of Staff, Moshe Ya'alon, when he was the head of the army, and you are the founder of the HaBithonistim, which is you have a special tagline for it. What did you say in English about the HaBithonistim?
Israel's Defense and Security Forum, IDSF.
That's very good. I want everybody can you give us a website that you want people to check out if they want to see and support the HaBithonistim movement?
Yeah. It's HaBithonistim.com. It's HaBithonistim without C, only H. They can Google Amir Avivi and also they probably get to our website. And we publish a lot of articles. We educate. By the way, I want to tell you, Ishay, that in 3-4 days, we talked with more than 60 Jewish communities around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Educating about the situation and talking about it. In many occasions, we said, okay, we have 1 hour, and then you find yourself talking 1.5 hours, and people want more. We're available for any Jewish community that wants to really understand what's going on and hear it from professionals and an authority voice, but also a very proud Jewish Zionistic voice. We are more than happy to educate and brief any community that is interested, and also organizations, of course.
It's good to know that you're out there, and it's good to know that Israel has, we are peace-loving people, but we also know how to fight. And if people want to start with us, we have great fighters. Once again, like in King David's times, we have great warriors like the Maccabees, like Joshua. So too today we have the continuation of that great tradition of great defense for the Jewish people. There is continuing the tradition of anti-Semitism and hate. There's a lot of groups out there from Haman's Persia to Gaza's Hamas. The bad guys are still out there, and we need the tough good guys to be able to keep Israel safe and to be a light unto the nations. General Avivi, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Ishay.